Hello everyone, my name is Odette and in this video I will talk about John Dewey, his pedagogy and his education. To begin with, let's talk about the author, John Dewey, who was a pragmatist, progressivist, educator, philosopher, and a social reformer. He was born in 1859 in Burlington, Vermont, and he grew up in a family that was very active in the social community in Vermont and in the democratic vision of the political community. Of course, these experiences influenced who he was as an educator and philosopher. Dewey's various roles, according to Theobald, greatly impacted education, and he was maybe one of the most influential educational philosophers known to date. Now let's see what Dewey believed in. Um, Dewey's beliefs and philosophy about education and learning have impacted countless educators over the years, and they are seen throughout many learning theories, such as the progressive education, the constructivism, the learner-centered theory, which we have seen in previous theories and approaches, and experiential knowledge. All of them differ from what Dewey describes as a traditional classroom setting. Dewey felt strongly that people have a responsibility to make the world a better place to live in, and to achieve this, they had to do it through education and social reform, according to Gutek 2814. And according to Shiro, he believed that education was a crucial ingredient in a social development. Now, Dewey's philosophy can be known as experimentalism or instrumentalism, which is basically centered in human experience. Dewey rejected the more rigid ideas, for example, the ones from transcendentalism, to which, by the way, Dewey has been exposed in the academia, because it views ideas as tools for experimenting with the goal of improving the human experience. As I mentioned before, Dewey has to do with pragmatism and progressive education. Uh, in the 19th century, pragmatism stated that theories and experiences in any learning have a value, and if they are applicable to real life and are practical, only if they are uh, related to or real life experiences, they have a value. So now, Dewey described progressive education as a product of discontent with traditional education. For example, he says that traditional education imposes adult standards, subject matter, and methodologies. He believed that traditional education, as I just described, was beyond the scope of young learners. It was not suitable for them, and so progressive education, as Dewey said, should include social engaging learning experiences that are developmentally appropriate for young children. Here is a important concept to understand Dewey's philosophy and pedagogy, which is learn by doing. Um, Dewey was a strong proponent for progressive educational reform. He believed that education should be based on the principle of learning through doing. And so the learning by doing is, as the authors here says, um, it's a methodology that comes from the constructivism approach. Is based on learning against teaching-based approaches. This pedagogical methodology departs from the didactic techniques based on recall or memorization and approaches more the techniques of know-how. Learning by doing is important to know that it is not a new concept. It's been seen since Aristotle, who said that what we have to learn to do, we learn by doing. In fact, we have always learned by doing from our parents, from our teachers, and even from our friends or the environment itself and other factors. And for example, in Europe, it was a classical method of vocational training since the Middle Ages. This began with the organizational and the relationship between teaching and the disciples. Now let's see what the Dewey School is about. Um, the school Dewey declared in 1896 is one of the form of social life which is abstracted and under control, directly experimental, as we said before. And if philosophy is ever to be an experimental science, the construction of a school it is the starting point. Now, Dewey proposed a school to university officials that uh, would keep theoretical work in touch with the demands of practice. This as the most essential component of the Department of Pedagogy. And at the center of the curriculum of the Dewey School was a term that we call occupation. This occupation is a mode of activity on the part of the child which reproduces or runs in a parallel way to some of the work carried on social life. We'll see an example in the following slide. Uh, in contrast to traditional classroom, Dewey thought that schools and classrooms should be representative of real life situations. Uh, this to allow the children to participate in learning activities. He was of the idea that abruptly introducing too much academic content out of context with the children's social lives, uh, he considered that as unethical teaching behavior. For example, in the school of Dewey, the youngest children in the school, who were approximately 4 and 5 years old, engage in activities familiar to them from their homes and neighborhoods, like cooking, sewing, and carpentry. And the 6 years old, for example, built a farm out of logs, planted cotton, and processed and transported their crop to market. Okay, so by the time the child enters the classroom, it's important to say that the children are already intensely active, and the question of education is a question of taking hold of his activities. And he said, Dewey has said that children did not arrive at school as blank slates, uh, where teachers might write the lessons of civilization, for example. Dewey also exposes that when children began their formal education and when they come to the classroom, they also bring with them four basic native impulses. Their impulses to communicate, to construct, to inquire, and to express in finer forms. And he said that these were natural resources, uninvested capital, upon the exercise of which depends the active growth of the child. Children also brought their own interests and activities from home. And here, the task or the main uh, activity for teacher to achieve is to make use of this raw material, um, and use it to guide activities at school toward valuable results. Uh, this argument placed Dewey at odds with both the proponents of a traditional curriculum centered education and also with romantic reformers who advocated a child centered pedagogy. Learner centered educators believe that Dewey's work is supportive of many of the beliefs about how the student learn. Uh, for example, in learner-centered classrooms, one can see much of John Dewey's social learning theory and educational beliefs in action. Dewey viewed the classroom as a social entity for children to learn and solve problems together as a community. In these classrooms, children are viewed as unique individuals, and students can be found busy at work, constructing their own knowledge through personal meaning, of course, and rather than the teacher imposing knowledge and teaching directing activities. As I said before, Dewey was very into political topics. So we now have the democracy in education. Dewey was not reluctant to assert that the formation of a certain character was the only genuine basis of right living, nor to identify right living with democratic practices. So the way a child's character is shaped, the moral and political agenda of schooling is sometimes called under a term that is the hidden curriculum. In this case, this aspect of his educational theory and practice wasn't less explicit, uh, though a good deal more radical than his other curricular aims. To do it, individuals achieve self-realization, which is a term I have previously explained in humanism. Uh, and so he argued that the individuals achieve this self-realization by utilizing their peculiar talents to contribute to the well-being of their community. And hence the critical task of education in a democratic society was to help these children to develop the character, also the habits and the virtues and values that would enable them to achieve the self-realization. Um, as a whole, do we believe that American schools were failing to provide an environment in which this self-realization could be attained? For example, most schools employed highly individualistic methods that called upon all the students in a classroom to, for example, read the same book simultaneously and recite the same lessons, but not collaborating between them. So in these conditions, the social impulses of the child were atrophied, and the teacher was unable to take advantage of the child's natural desire to give out, to help others, to do something for others. So this means that the teacher didn't take advantage of the children's intention to serve. Now, as in every approach, we have methodologies. For example, here we have a responsive classroom. It is a research-based approach to teaching grades. Um, this is one teaching approach that stresses the importance of building a community of learners, and this shows evidence of Dewey's theories in the 21st century in the responsive classroom curriculum. This responsive classroom focuses on the strong link between the academic achievements and the social emotional learning. Um, the premise behind this responsive classroom approach is that a high quality education um, is built on the foundation of a safe and happy learning community. Many of our authors John Dewey's theories and ideas are evident in the responsive classroom approach. It has a very specific recommendations and strategies for how teachers can start the school year in a way that establishes a classroom community that will allow students to thrive socially and academically. We have another author, Taylor, in 2005, who pointed out that by first off, he shared Dewey's vision that it is the responsibility of educators to create cultural changes within the classroom that are accepted and internalized and that are acted on by students. This author pointed out that by fostering positive learning communities in classroom, academic achievements should increase, and that in educational system as diverse as the one in the United States, it is essential to explicitly teach that different opinions and perspectives are highly valued in classrooms today. So basically, Dewey was concerned with that education should be practical and based on the experience of children, and they had to maintain a strong link with the academic achievements and the activities that the children do on their daily basis. He also promoted a community work inside the classroom. He exposes the importance of acting as a democracy community and support each other's work through activities that had to be previously planned and analyzed by the teacher to take advantage of the children's natural instinct to serve others. So now if you want to know more about this theory, here are some references to where I took information to make this presentation. Thank you for your attention and I hope this was useful to everyone who watches the video.